Hi, welcome back. It's Roberta's Countdown to Retirement. Last week should have been episode 13, but I named it incorrectly, so I'm naming today's episode 14. It's December 22nd, 3 days till Christmas. I hope you're all done all the busy stuff and are ready to just kind of take a deep breath and prepare your hearts for Christmas and the reason for the season. And that's kind of what I'd like to talk to you about today. If the sound is kind of wonky, I invested some money in some better wireless mics. Hopefully when I'm done, I'll find that these are working really good. We'll talk about that maybe next week in New Year's with tech that I keep changing. Anyway, last week I shared with you about why this month is so hard for me, why last week and this week are so incredibly difficult for me. And I said I'd tell you today how we cope, or how I cope. So I hope that you find some of this helpful. So as I said last week, my dad died. I was 6 months past my 18th birthday. I was extremely close to my father. He was the center of my universe. He was the center of my mom's universe. And I've likened to that morning, that call that said my dad had gone, to a day where I fell into a deep, dark pit and kept trying to claw my way out. But the more I clawed, the more dirt I pulled into myself, and the hole I couldn't get out of the hole. I didn't understand what that was. It took me a very long time to figure out what that was. But anyway, so my dad's funeral was on December 23rd, and there was still a lot of family around. And at that point, I told my mom that I didn't want to go back to college. I wanted to take some time. But my mom was really insistent, that my dad had been really insistent that my education would continue. And when I started to argue with her, other folks, my uncles, and my cousin Bob, who my mom treated like a son, who I thought of as an older brother, told me not to fight her, told me the same thing my dad always told me. Don't upset your mother, make her life go the way she needs it to go. So arguing about something like this would upset her, and they didn't want me to do that. Now, these people didn't know what they were doing to me, and they didn't mean to hurt me. They had no clue what was going on with me. There was just no way for them to know that. They were of generations that thought you suffer loss. After the funeral, you get up and you go out and you start your life again, and that's all. That's what you do, and you take it one foot at a time, going forward. And I'd like to think that's what I was doing, but it wasn't. So I did go back to school in January. And that first term, I did pretty well. I managed to go to class, and I managed to take all my classes and pass with a B+ average. But by spring term, I was unraveling. And I would say 3 days out of 5, I would be huddled in a dark corner in my apartment, just ignoring the world. And I'd go to school maybe 2 days and try to get notes and try to take classes. And it wasn't going really well. And then there came late in that term, as I was getting close to finals, maybe 3 or 4 weeks from finals, that I didn't leave my apartment, not for like 2 weeks. And you're saying, how did your mom not know that? Well, because I'm a really good faker, and I would call my mom once a week. She had told me not to come home so often. I needed to focus on school. So I was staying by myself in the apartment in Salem. I no longer had a roommate, but I would call her once a week, and I would tell her life was wonderful, and I'd put on a happy face and talk to her and tell her how great life was, that classes were going on, I was making friends, I was saying everything she wanted to hear to make her life happy, because I really wanted to do what my dad told me, which was, don't make your mom unhappy. But by really close to the end of that term, I wasn't leaving my apartment. And God bless the lady that lived across the quad from me. Everyone in my apartment complex was somebody going to school. And I'd made friends with this couple across the quad. I'd been to their apartment several times for dinner. And so she noticed that I hadn't been going out of my apartment, that the apartment was staying dark and I hadn't left my apartment. So she comes banging on the door one Sunday morning and she says, Roberta, you've got to come answer the door. I'm not leaving till you come and answer the door. And she just kept pounding and pounding and pounding until I finally went to the door. And then she basically shoved herself into my apartment and said, you can't go on like this. You have to do something. So today you're going to church with me. You're going to go in the shower and I'm going to pick you out some clothes and you're going to get showered and you're going to get dressed and you're going to go to church with us this morning. So I did. Now, I'm a Methodist. I've been a Methodist all my life. This was a Foursquare church, way more evangelical than anything I was used to going to. And I'm sitting there, I'm really uncomfortable because these people are, praise the Lord, hallelujah, preach it, brother, all these kinds of things that Methodists don't do in church. Well, they do it a little more now than they did then. But anyway, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I'm never coming back to this place again. So if I don't want her to bother me, I've got to start going out of my apartment, and going to classes and looking like I have a life, which is what I did. So I was kind of pretending for my neighbor too, but I was going out of my apartment. But I get to the end, I get to finals. I think I dropped 3 classes before grades came out so that I didn't have to take the finals. And I took finals on 2, and I knew before I left Salem that I'd flunked. So I knew that I'd basically flunked out of college. And that's what I had to go home and tell my mom, was that this wasn't working for me, Mom. I think we should just go to Salem and pack up my apartment and give them notice that, give them the final month's rent. And we should, because I'm going to flunk. And I just don't think I can focus on school. At that point, my mom was willing to listen to what I had to say. So we did. We packed up my apartment and I came home to Garibaldi. My mom said, if you come home, you got to get a job. You got to work. And I tried to explain to her what was going on, and she thought it would be better when I was at home, where she'd make sure I'd get up and I'd eat and I'd get a job. So that's what I did. I got a job at the hospital as a billing clerk because I had all these office skills. So I got a job. And I got up every day and went to work, and every Sunday, my mom insisted on going to church. I went to church, but honestly, on the day my dad died, I gave up on God too, because I had grown up my whole life being told God answers prayer. If you pray, God will answer prayer. And I had been praying ever since the day my dad told me about his diagnosis, that I wanted God to make my father well, and I wanted our life to go back to the way it had been before cancer. And that's what I kept praying for. It was a child's set of prayers. I didn't understand that God wasn't a transactional God, that I didn't promise to be this or that and he'd do good for me. But I just believed God had abandoned me because he hadn't answered prayer. But I went to church every Sunday with my mom because that's what she expected. And again, don't make your mom unhappy. Don't upset your mom. So I went to church every Sunday. It was hard for me to go to church and look at that pastor that we had at the time in the face, because quite frankly, in the whole summer that I had been home alone while my dad was sick and my mom was with him, that pastor hadn't called on me at once to see how I was doing. Didn't check in to see if I needed comforting, if I needed counseling, didn't contact me at all. We shared our minister at Garibaldi. We shared with the Nehalem church, and he spent most of his time in Nehalem. Never called on us once. And in fact, the Sunday after my dad died, my mom and I went to church. The man didn't even say, I'm sorry for your loss. Didn't even acknowledge that we'd had a loss. So I felt God had abandoned me, and I thought the man that was supposed to represent God in my life, the pastor, thought he'd abandoned me, so I just wasn't having anything to do with it. I went to church. I didn't listen to anything that was said there. In time, I started playing the piano there because they needed a pianist. So I went to church every Sunday and played the piano, but it wasn't happening for me. So I worked for 2 years, and then I went back to Portland to business school and decided to get my certification as a legal administrative assistant. And that was a 12-month course. I finished that, so I had my certification. Came back here and got a job as the legal secretary for the Tillamook County Public Defender's Office. Still going to church every week, pretending that I believed. Just doing whatever I had to do to make my mom feel comfortable. But still just, I didn't see much of my friends. I didn't have a lot of friends, but I was certainly not spending any time with them. One of them had babies, so her life was different. And the one who had been my roommate, we just didn't see much of each other. I didn't want to see anybody really. So it was work and home and church with my mom. That was pretty much it. Still just mucking along, not understanding what was going on in my life and why it seemed so bleak and empty. And then it just got bleaker and bleaker. I got a job for the Public Defender's Office, and I got my own apartment in Tillamook. And I worked for the public defender for 2 years. And I was just, again, falling down into that hole, a pit, trying to scratch my way out and getting deeper and deeper and not understanding what was happening. And just things were starting to drop at my job, and I wasn't doing everything I should have been really well. And something major happened. And I knew that I was going to lose my job because I let something major not occur that needed to occur. And so I knew I was going to lose my job anyway. So I, early one morning, I decided to leave a note on my desk saying, "I'm sorry, I've screwed up so badly I can't face you, so I quit. I'm sorry." I had packed all my clothes in a suitcase at my apartment. And then I went to Garibaldi and I waited down the street till I knew my mom had walked downtown. And I taped a note on her door that said, "I've just humiliated myself. I can't face anyone here. I've done something horrible. I let something bad happen at work, and I just can't face anybody. And I'm no good to you, and I'm no good to anyone here. So I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. I just don't know." And then I taped that note on the drawer, and I drove away. And quite frankly, on that long day in that car, I actually really thought about stopping at the beach and just taking a walk into the ocean and letting myself drown. Or I thought, I'm just going to drive this car till I've taken all my money out of the bank today. I'm just going to drive till I run out of money, and then I don't know what I'll do. Well, guess I'll figure it out. So I drove south on Highway 101 till I got to Newport, which is really not that far away from home. If you're going to run away from home, run 60 miles. But I was getting tired, and I just needed to not be here at home. So I got to Newport. I got a room, took a long walk on the beach, went back to my room, and turned on the TV that night. And on the TV was this show called Don't Ask Me, Ask God. Now, my initial impulse was to turn it off, but I kept it on. And so what this show did is they'd play vignettes with actors portraying different moments of crisis in a life. And then they would talk about what was transpiring in that vignette, and they'd go to prayer. And one of the vignettes was about losing someone to cancer and being devastated by that death. And it just spoke to me so vividly because the actors in that vignette were living what I was feeling, the darkness and the despair. And then it got to the end, and the person who was doing the program, I can't remember who it was, but he said, "If grief is overcoming you and overwhelming you, and you feel like there's no one there to help you, get down on your knees with me now and pray to me to God that he can help you. Now, I told you I didn't believe in God anymore, but in that moment, as I was sitting there sobbing because of what I'd seen, I realized I had nothing left to do. There was, it was kill myself or get down on my knees and ask for help. And I got down on my knees in that hotel room, and I prayed the prayer that the man was praying, and I was sobbing. And I'm not going to lie to you, I had a God moment. I had one of those moments when that room was filled with light, and I felt the presence of Jesus Christ there with me. And he reached out his hand to me, and I heard him say, Roberta, I'm right here. I never left. You walked away, but I was right here just waiting for you. And I grabbed onto that, and I took it into my heart, and I took a deep breath, and I realized I'd let a little piece of the darkness go. So when I'd calmed myself and the television show was over, I called my mom. And when she heard my voice, she started to cry, and I was apologizing. I was telling her, Mom, I don't know how to fix everything, but I know I want to. I know I need to. I can't go on like this. I have to figure out how to fix what's wrong with me. And she said, come home. And then she said, our church is getting ready to merge with the Bay City Methodist Church, and I really like this pastor that they have at Bay City. Come with me to church and let's give this a shot. So I came home, and in the midst of the merger, the two churches were having lots of Sunday brunches after church so that you could meet the pastor and his wife and some of the people from the church. And so I met the pastor. His name was David Thompson. And I liked him, and he seemed like he wanted to know each one of us, and he wanted to talk with us, and he was willing to make home visits and talk. And he was the first person in 6 years, I was 24 years old, he was the first person in 6 years that wanted to talk about what I was feeling and what was going on with me. He was the first person to put names to what was happening to me, that I was still in the midst of mourning, that I was in the process of grieving, that I was suffering from depression. All of those were things that in our house we didn't talk about because we didn't ask people for help. We picked ourselves up and took care of ourselves. And for the first time, I had a name for the things I was feeling. And so David, understanding that, reached out and found ways for me to connect in the church. I love to sing, so I joined the church choir and got to know his wife, Kim, who was also wonderfully caring and nurturing and helping me on my path. And there were counseling sessions, and there were study groups where I could talk about God. And I realized God really had never left me. I had left God, but he'd been there all the time, and I just needed to let him help me. I needed him to let the people of God help me. And that's what I did here at the Bay City United Methodist Church. They made all the difference. At first, it was David asking me if I wanted to teach a Sunday school class. And then he said I didn't have to do it on my own. I could co-teach with my mom, who loved small children and was teaching the nursery class. So I started there with my mom, with the small children. And there's nothing better than small children to bring you out of yourself. Later, I taught some Sunday school classes of my own and found out that I loved teaching middle schoolers. I loved the questions they ask and watching their eyes light up when they got the idea of a concept. And I began to engage more with people because I wanted to be somebody those kids could look up to. So that's how I started to rebuild myself, by just letting God's people into my heart. Now, did that make Christmas any easier? No, I still wanted to avoid Christmas. It's really hard to sit in a church with the Christmas lights and the Christmas pageants, which I helped my mom with, when I wasn't feeling Christmas, because Christmas still brought up the memories of losing my dad in that funeral. But then something changed We'd been going to church here for about 6 years. And my mom, the economy here was going kind of wonky, and things were not good for a lot of people in the community. And my mom remembered what it had been like to be a child of the Depression. And she wanted the church to do something to help people be able to get Christmas presents, and to be able to keep their dignity and not be feeling like they were begging for help. So she had this idea: what if all the people in church donated items that families give each other for Christmas? Not used ones, but new ones, are so gently used that you couldn't tell they weren't new. And then we would invite through the school, through the Women's Resource Center, which is where battered women and women who were needing help go, through the social services programs in Tillamook County. We could invite people who really needed help to come to the church and pick out the gifts they needed for all their family, not just their kids. Although, quite frankly, we all love to buy toys, so there was more stuff here for kids. But anyway, I digress. And then everyone could come and pick out what they needed. There were no prices. It wasn't like a sale. It was basically a free will offering. If you had a couple of bucks in your pocket that you wanted to donate, you could do that. If you didn't, you still got the gifts. And we said that the money that came from the free will offering would go to the county's food bank. And the pastor said that he thought that was a great program, and my mom found some people to help her, and she started this program. Now, I was working the first year and I didn't take any time off, but she needed help the second year working it. It was like a 3-day event. So I took some vacation time. By that time, I had a job for a company called Aerolift. And emotionally, I was much better. I was digging myself out of the hole. And I went to work with my mom at Christmas shop. And I met these people who, sometimes through no fault of their own, a battered wife who'd been beaten and finally got out, and Women's Resources was helping her, and she was starting from scratch. She came and somebody had donated Christmas decorations, and she found some that looked a lot like Christmas decorations that her grandmother had owned and left to her. And she told me the last thing that her ex-husband did on the last night that she let him hit her was he took a baseball bat and he broke all of those decorations, and told her she didn't deserve them. And she was crying. And that was the moment when my heart opened up, and I realized Christmas wasn't about what I got. Christmas was about what I could give. And it wasn't about gifts, and it wasn't about the stuff we were giving away. What we can give is ourselves, our time, our hearts and our ears, a hand to hold on to. Because what I learned in all the years that I then helped with Christmas Shop was all people really want is to be seen and to be heard, to be acknowledged, to know that they are loved by someone, and to be able to keep their dignity, to be able to be given their dignity. Those are the gifts we can bring. And all of a sudden, as I learned that through a few years of working at Christmas Shop, Christmas wasn't an awful thing anymore. In fact, I couldn't wait to go toy shopping for the Christmas Shop. I couldn't wait to get here to the Christmas Shop and see the faces of moms and dads as they got the things they needed for their kids, so that their Christmas tree wasn't just whatever social group got their family's name, but that they had things that they picked out themselves that either said from Santa or from mom and dad, because they picked them themselves and they knew they were things their children would love. That was my gift, seeing those faces. I've never forgotten in 2007, our church had a catastrophic building partial collapse of our steeple during a really bad windstorm. And so we had to set our Christmas shop up in another building here in Bay City. And people, the lights were out, they were cold, they were damp. Some of them had roof damage, and they had been tarpaulin roofs for days. And a really hard time, because we'd had flooding, the lights had been out, people weren't working, so they weren't earning money, and it was just before Christmas. And this couple came in, and someone had donated some, it would be like Barbie furniture for a Barbie house, but you had to put it together. And this dad got so excited because while he was standing there picking out the pieces of furniture he was going to get for his daughter's Barbie set, he said, I don't have any money, but he said to his wife, you know what? There's all this wood in the garage, he says, and I'm not working right now. I could build her a fantastic house for the Barbie. And he was so excited that he could do something just by being sparked by somebody donating those Barbie furniture pieces. This dad got this wonderful idea, and when he left, he was just bubbling with excitement. When he'd come in, he'd looked so sad and so depressed, but when he left, he was sparkling and he was bubbly, and he couldn't wait to go home because he was going to go out in the garage and he was drawing plans before he ever left the Christmas shop. He was that excited. That was my Christmas gift that year. That was what I got, was helping this guy find a way to be happy about Christmas. So that's what Christmas means to me now, because of other people letting me help at reaching out. And that's what I learned God calls me to do, is to reach out, to be his hands, to be his arms, to be his feet, to be his ears, to be his heart, and love the people that I find myself in the midst of, that I can help with problems. Now, Christmas is still hard, but our church started a special church service a few years ago that helps me immeasurably. And we did this last night. This is not a picture from last night. It's a picture from a few years ago. We have a service called Longest Night, because the 21st of December is the longest night of the year. It's long and cold and wet here in Tillamook, and sometimes the lights are out on the longest night, which makes it even worse. And if you're missing the people that you used to be able to be with on Christmas, this service can help, because it's a time to be with other people. It's a time to hear some readings that help you center your heart. There's a time for lighting candles, and I discover what the candles let me do is I light a candle to let go of the sadness of missing my mom and my dad. I let go of that sadness, and then I can let in more of the light from those candles, the light that God sends at Christmas through the story of the gift of his son and the story of what love can do and how love can change the world. So last night, for the first time in a couple of weeks, I felt so much better as I lit my candles for my parents. And they gave me a reading to read last night that I'd like to share with you, because what I've discovered through the years is that I wouldn't know how much the light meant and how the light changed my life if I didn't know the darkness. So I'd like to read something to you as soon as I find it here. Bear with me here. Of course, it's not where I left it, because that would be too easy. I'll be right back. Bear with me and take some moments to quiet yourself and center your heart with some light. Please let the notebook still be there. Nope. It's called On Joy and Sorrow by Kahil Gibran. Then a woman said, "Speak to us of joy and sorrow." And he answered, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked, and the selfsame well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears. And how else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds your wine the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven? And is not the lute that soothed your spirit the very wood that was hollowed with knives? When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that is giving you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. Some of you say, joy is greater than sorrow, and others say, nay, sorrow is the greater. But I say unto you, they are inseparable. Together they come, and when one sits alone with you at your board, remember that the other is asleep on your bed. Verily, you are suspended like scales between your sorrow and your joy. Only when you are empty are you at standstill and balanced. When the treasure keeper lifts you to weigh his gold and his silver, needs must your joy or your sorrow rise or fall. I just thought that was such an appropriate reading for me to get to read last night, because that is what I've discovered. The very thing that caused me the deepest sorrow also opened my heart to others and the joy that being a gift to others can bring. So without the one, I wouldn't have the other. So we all find our ways through grief. And we all find our ways through pain and sorrow. We all find our ways through joy. But I could only share with you what helped me with mine. So now, as we are 3 days away from Christmas, last night I let go of the sadness of the memory to hang on to the good times that I remember of Christmas with my family. And I look forward to Christmas Eve service when we celebrate the coming of Christ, because that's what Christmas is to me now, the coming of Christ. So that's all I have for this week. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas. Find someone to share this time with. Find time to share quietness with one another. Find time to share joy. See you next week.